Welcome to In the Loop, a podcast from Plus One Robotics that spans the learning gap between warehouse automation and the technology that is driving the robotics industry. Learn from experts in industrial automation on how the supply chain is transforming as industry leaders explain their contributions to the robotics ecosystem. Listen in and stay in the loop, powered by Plus One Robotics.
Hello everyone, this is Brent Barcey with Plus One Robotics. You are listening or watching to the In the Loop podcast. We're here today with Prather, who is now the Director of Robotics and Autonomous Systems at ASTM. Aaron, thanks for coming down to South Central Texas.
Thank you for having me.
What does ASTM stand for?
ASTM International stands for the American Society for Testing Materials. It's sort of out of date. And that's why we refer to ourselves as ASTM International, because we are no longer American only. We are an international group.
All right, so we just walked the our customer experience center, and you got to see some of the technology we're deploying out there. How do you see ASTM Plus One, all the things that we're all kind of driving to in this space? Where do you guys fit in the process of someone's automation journey? I mean, does Plus One call you guys up and say, hey, we just did an automation audit at a customer and they had some questions about XYZ. We need to bring you in. How do you guys work? How do we get you out there?
Yeah, I mean, we are a standards organization, so we're building standards for various types of products. Right now, ASTM covers several industries, almost 100 industries, almost 13,000 standards across those industries. And for my team and myself, we're focusing on robotics and automation. And exactly how do we provide test and performance standards that you at Plus One can run one of your cells against and actually measure performance that then you can report back to an end user how well you did, or hire a third-party organization to run the test for you to provide those results. So we're trying to provide some commonality within the industry, but also to give the industry the knowledge that this stuff is working. This stuff works. And this is how we're going to prove to you that it works, and it works safely, and it will hit the metrics that we say we're going to hit.
So a lot of the customers that we're going into now are new in this journey, right?
Yes.
And you said commonality, right? So I'm curious as to how much commonality do you see in the space that we play in at Plus One with regard to the warehouse, e-com, logistics? Some people are very sophisticated. They've hired outside talent, and people have done stuff in the automotive space. But a lot of times, this is sometimes the first robot they're installing.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where organizations like ASTM, ANSI, ISO, UL, all us standards development organizations, or SDOs, is we're trying to help in that aspect, because you're exactly right, Brett, that some of these new companies, this is their first robot. What are they to build to? What is the thing that they need to make sure that they're checking all the boxes so that they know that they're getting a safe product, a workable product? And it is right now, I would say, we're still in the Wild West phase.
Right.
But it is starting to play out, and what's really starting to happen is you're starting to see regulatory agencies like OSHA and others start to look at these standards that have been developed by the us SDOs out there of, okay, the industry is starting to develop their own playbooks, their own standards that they want to be held to. So that's where I think the positive side's coming is we all know it's sort of Wild West, but we're all working together to tell the regulatory agencies, this is how we can do it, and we know we can do it. So if you're going to regulate us down the road, at least we've done our homework and research to show you how we should be held accountable. And we see that in other industries. Case in point, a lot of the toy manufacturers develop the toy safety standards that then are enforced by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Okay. So there is a pathway that the robotics industry could follow in this. But right now, what we need at all SDO organizations, ASTM, ANSI, A3, UL, we need more folks at the table that have this knowledge of what is needed. to do this stuff.
So who should bring outside counsel in? I mean, is it plus one? Is it the integrator? Because if the end user doesn't know what they don't know,
Yes.
right? Which is very true. At what point do you bring them in at the very beginning of this automation journey when you're saying, hey, we think we can automate this, automate that, or do you bring them in once you get the pilot in and say, okay,
Yeah.
we've got the pilot in, it's running really well.
Yeah.
Now we got to take a look at this. How do these dominoes fall and in what order?
Yeah, I would say at the point now that there have been some great standards developed, like R15.08 by A3 and R15.06, also an A3 ANSI standard, that you should be building your POCs to standards. And the reason I say that is if that's going to now become your deployable unit, you don't want to go back and have to reinvent it to the standard for deployment.
How often does that happen, do you think, right now with regard to people that are putting...
I would say, unfortunately, it's probably over 50%.
Is it really?
Yeah, because, again, going back to your original point, a lot of folks just don't know what they're supposed to be building to. They don't know what they don't know kind of stuff. So that's going to be the next big thing that a lot of us SDOs need to do is we need to communicate this to us. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I've been able to talk to some of your folks to actually make them aware that these are the kind of things that they need to start paying attention to. They need to start reaching out to organizations like ANSI, ASTM, ISO, and so forth to start learning about this. But also the flip side is SDOs need to do a better job of making ourselves available and also making sense of what's out there, because there is a lot of standards out there.
It changes what's out there, and then the technology too, right? I mean, it's the technology. Every quarter you see something awesome on LinkedIn that didn't exist the quarter before.
Yes.
So what bucket does this fit into? Is this going to be a problem with OSHA? Is this going to is this meet the ISO standards? I mean, how the hell do you keep up? Because they want to consume the technology. Everybody's board of directors is watching CNBC and all the other things, going, man, all this stuff is going on. We can get a lights out warehouse, which is never going to happen, but they think that it can. So they're bringing all this awesome technology in, but someone's got to mash this together in a very safe way.
Yeah, and it's going to take a group effort. It really is. And all we can do is organizations like yourself that are one of those leaders that sort of tell their customers that they need to look at these things. We need more organizations like yourself to actually sort of say, hey, we're building two standards, but maybe tell us what is the standards you might have internally, because some companies already have on their books that they have to follow certain standards. UL standards are sort of bread and butter across it. I know at my former employer at FedEx, pretty much everything had to have a UL stamp. And so you knew you had to build to UL standards. So it's just going to take a lot more communications, a lot more efforts on everyone's part. But I think it will dribble down, because ultimately at the end of the day, what we don't want to do is we don't want regulatory agencies coming in to tell us as an industry what to do.
So you mentioned your time at FedEx. You spent the better part, for those of you who don't know, but Aaron spent the better part of 3 decades over at FedEx. I've known him for quite some time. Now that you're on this side of the table, has your perspective changed? I mean, what has it opened your eyes to? And you went, wow, I guess I didn't realize we were ahead of the game, or we were behind the 8 ball, or the industry in general really needs to be pulled along.
Yeah. I mean, I left FedEx because I was, again, I was wrapping up a 26-year career. I loved it. But I also was starting to look at, okay, as I'm entering the second half of my career on this planet, of do I want to continue to work for one industry, one company in one industry on just their solutions, or do I want to look at help everybody? And that's why I sort of jumped to this role. And during my time, short time with ASTM, I have seen so many different robots. Some of the coolest things out there, from agriculture to aerospace. And I can tell you this, we're hearing the same problems. And that's, I think, one of the greatest things. We have problems. The good thing is the problems are similar regardless if you're in agriculture, manufacturing, logistics. They're the same problems across the board. So that means if we can come up with solutions in one, you're probably going to be able to solve other problems across other industries and grow the industry faster. But if we don't have the communications between those groups, that's not going to happen. So that's, again, going back to what we've been talking about already, is we have a communications gap in a way of who, if you have a problem, who are you talking to? And then is that problem being elevated across the industry for everyone to hear that problem and say, hey, I have that same problem. I need that same solution. Because it's interesting of how agriculture sort of laid some baselines for AMRs and logistics, because they were starting to put robots in the field just to navigate through the field.
Right.
Well, that played into how AMRs got big in logistics. Now that technology is getting mature to the point that it can go back to agriculture and explode even more because of, again, each industry is adding value as we're building. So if we keep those communication streams open between everybody, we're going to solve problems a lot faster. And so, yeah, as a former end user, I think like an end user.
Right.
And so when I'm talking to these end users in other companies, it's like I feel their pain because I used to be one.
You got really excited about aerospace. What's some of the cooler things you're seeing on that side of the table right now?
The coolest one is the one here in San Antonio.
Talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people might not know, but Crystal Parrott, who is our chief operating officer, she was the lead on this project. But
yeah. What I'm going to mispronounce the company's name.
SWRI, Southwest Research Institute.
SWRI, but now the company that took the SWRI research, Xera.
Yes, yeah.
So for those on the listening, just Google paint peeling robot 4 stories tall, because that's the best way to describe this robot. It is 4 stories tall. Here in San Antonio, you guys had to build a building specifically for the robot because it was so big. And that is just amazing. But what's really amazing is that it's using a very interesting laser removal technology to peel the paint off of the aircraft much faster than a human ever would. But it's also sucking up all the dust at the same time, so you don't have to have a clean suit on. I mean, that is massive. I mean, we always talk about dull, dirty, dangerous jobs.
Right.
Talk about one of the ultimate ones. And it's just so amazing. And standing at the feet of this robot was just awe-inspiring. But the flip side is the other robot I've fallen in love with over the past 6 months is the grain weevil robot that's been developed in Nebraska to break up grain in a grain harvesting bin. Doesn't sound like much, but that's a dangerous job for a human. So now you can throw a robot in there, it'll break up the grain and keep it all level, and the person doesn't have to get in there where it can turn into
are we talking what type of robot are we talking?
This is a robot that
an AMR, or is this an articulated arm, or what? How's the process working?
It's an AMR in a way, but it's not. I mean, it's one of these new robots that we have to sort of define. And it has found a hole in the standards framework, and
nice.
But it is a great robot, and we need that robot deployed because it saves lives.
Right.
But there's no standards around it. So again, we're back in this chicken egg kind of thing. But those are like the 2 coolest robots. The biggest robot I've ever seen, and this tiny little guy who just gets thrown into grain to do his job. But those robots blow my mind.
Yeah, the robot you talked about here in San Antonio, Crystal Parrott, our chief operating officer, she was the lead on that project. And most people don't realize that Air Force One, all the, whether you're a Saudi oil magnate or you're Jay-Z and Beyonce, your jets get serviced in San Antonio. Yep. Most, if you want to trick out a jet, things like that all happens here. So a lot of the tech that comes out of this area is because of the access. We're just down the street from Kelly Field where a lot of that happens. But I'm curious as to where you think this is going. I mean, we're in 23 now. There's, like you said, I think one of the bigger problems or challenges that we're going to see is just what you just said, is these guys are all these kids in California and Boston and San Antonio, Austin, or wherever, they're coming up with all these crazy things to do, and people want to grasp onto it. And we got to keep up, right? I mean, that's we got safety is the overriding priority at the end of the day. We're all trying to go home into our families. So, have you seen, and now that you're on this side of the table, miss any applications where you walked out there and you went, oh, you can no, like what is going on right now? This is not safe. You guys got to take a step back and rethink how you're approaching this problem, because there are some standards here, right?
Yeah. Some of the scariest robots I've seen is anytime someone's put it like a knife into a robot's hand And it's like, why? why are we doing this?
But it's a collaborative robot.
It's a collaborative robot. It's safe out of the box. And that just drives me up the wall all the time. There's not to say that we don't need a robot that can cut things, but the whole thing is just because you put it on the end of a collaborative robot's arm does not mean it's safe. But I mean, I think there's some that are starting to push the edge. And I'm not saying that because the standard's not there, you shouldn't do it. Because we want the standards to actually help innovation.
Right.
And so even if you do something like the grain weevil robot that has no standards around it, it's still moving along, and the standards are going to come. But it is, use the standards that exist as a guide so you don't do really crazy things, like putting a knife on the end of robots.
Right.
Because those are sometimes the things that can hold us back and as an industry. And especially as the industry continues to grow and we start getting into the general public, then we start touching on the whole fear of terminators and all that. We need to give some things to the public to understand that, and that's where standardization comes in to play. But going back to your original question, where are we going? I think we are in a bright future. We just need more folks to be in the industry to help us do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I was just recently at a conference where they're talking about they're starting to get teach pendants in 7th and 8th graders' hands, right? Yep. So I mean, that's really going to be the way this, because scale is what we're all trying to get to, especially in the +1 side of things with regard to the warehouse, e-com, logistics market. And to get to scale, you need people that can grab teach pendants. You need people that can go out there on the floor and get a robot back up and running if there's a problem. And today, most people's maintenance departments do not have that skill set there. So, I mean, I think coupling with what you do, the education of it, it really is, I think the future is bright. Yeah. I mean, this is a great industry to be in. I've loved every minute I've been in it, and I'm looking forward to keep doing this. But yeah, we need to recruit folks. We need more folks coming in, and I think I've made a couple of points that sometimes you got to get them in the middle schools. Yeah.
And so as you mentioned, it's time to put a teach pendant in a 7th grader's hand. I think it can be done safely, and it also will encourage them to look at those careers. So if you don't know it exists, you ain't gonna follow it.
No, and I think that FANUC has gone to a tablet-based collaborative, and that's, I mean, being that they're the largest right now, OEM, and then you've got UR, it's becoming more gamified, for lack of a better term. So it's, you watch a 7th, 8th grader grab a teach pendant, within 10 minutes they're teaching points, right? I mean, they do understand how to do it faster than most adults, quite frankly. So it's pretty neat to watch, but it's just getting the teach pendant in their hand.
Yeah, I've always been an advocate that actually, we all remember going to school and we'd always ask the teacher, well, when am I ever going to use this stuff? And it's like, well, maybe we need to have robots in geometry classes, because that's XYZ. A robot arm is going to teach you a lot about XYZ coordinates, and it's going to be right there in front of the kids. So maybe we need to start rethinking how we teach some of these courses, and how do we integrate robots into those courses to show those kids, this is how you're going to use it. This is how it's going to impact your life.
Exactly.
So we just need to get creative.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, I appreciate you making the trip down to South Central Texas. I hope you enjoyed being on the podcast. Hope you enjoyed seeing our ranch here. It's been a great conversation, and you can come down anytime for some brisket.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Everybody, thank you for listening. Again, this is Brent Barcey with +1 Robotics, and you just heard the latest episode of In the Loop. Thank you.
Stay in the loop. Powered by +1 Robotics.